Hello, Mr.Gobbo here. Welcome to my battle report number 5, this time versus PloomoOfKarak, who is playing his first ever 9th Age battle. We are using a roster size of 2500 points, and my opponent brings his Dread Elves to the table. For this game, we are using the 9th Age v.0.11.1 rule set. For deployment type, we rolled the classic deployment, and the secondary objective was breakthrough. Again, we rolled the dice to place the terrain. My opponent particularly fancied that exercise. Now, let's take a look at the army lists. As always, feel free to pause the video at any time if you need more time for the details. My opponent went for Beastmaster theme with a very fast army and not too strong in magic. I really liked the dynamic of it, and the models were nicely painted too. In regards to my army, we had scheduled a match between my close combat oriented Cave Gobbo army with no war machines whatsoever, led by Mr.Gobbo and his dwarven holds. However, a couple of hours before the game, my opponent decided to go with the Dread Elves instead. I missed this piece of information at first, but managed to quickly take out a giant and about 15 Nashers, and then squeeze in 3 war machines and adjust some magic items, getting room for level 2 with Dispel Scroll. I'll try out the close combat Gobbo army another time. My list for this battle should still be relatively fun to play, if not a little underpowered. For instance, I wanted to test 2 Nasher wrecking teams with their new nerfed rules, and maybe some Grotlings too. However, I later realized that I had no idea what I was doing. As for spells, my level 3 chose the Path of Shadows and got the signature spell and spells number 4, 5 and 6. The signature is a favorite, and it never hurts to reduce the elves' toughness to 1. For fluff reasons, I had my level 2 go with the Path of the Little Green Gods, since I consider that particular path to be currently underpowered. I got spells number 4 and 6, and this time I just have to try out the Vortex. Spell number 4 gives me another go at hexing my opponent if the other 2 from the Path of Shadows fail. And now to the battle plan. Number 1.
What? There's no Stunties, boss! What's the plan now?
Number 2. Number 3.
Send out the Madgets! Shoot him dead!
Number 4. Number 5. Victory. The Dread Elves got turn 1 because my opponent deployed his whole army first. So it's time for the Dread Elves turn 1. In the movement phase, I really underestimated my opponent's speed. He used the triple movement banner on his legionnaires and then marched/moved everything up. In the magic phase, he cast the d6 strength 4 hit spell on my right wrecking team, getting an irresistible force and killing the poor thing. However, he lost 3 Dread Knights in the resulting miscast blast. In the shooting phase, his left unit of repeater auxiliaries shoot at my Cave Gobbo character horde and kills 1 Gobbo. His Ravencloaks deal 3 wounds to the remaining Nasher wrecking team, killing it. I guess I'll have to test them in another game. There was no close combat, and so it's time for the Orcs and Goblins turn 1. In the movement phase, I moved my left flank forwards, trying to move around the ruins for future flank charge on the centrally placed Dread Elf units. This was a huge mistake on my part. I suddenly remembered that I couldn't just march through the ruin because of the dangerous terrain. Stupid, silly deployment, Mr. Gobbo. My Nasher Dashers and Scrapwagon go for the Dark Raiders, but fail to make contact. I try to move my Greenlings and Nashers up to redirect his 2 combat blocks, but again I brain farts and don't angle my Greenlings properly. This is what happens when you have only slept 5 hours and haven't eaten for a whole day. We had a nice meal after turn 1 though. I move up my Spear Gobbos just a wee bit to get them within range of releasing the Madgets in my shooting phase, but in turn I forget to angle the unit properly, exposing my flank. My right Nasher Dasher unit needed to roll 12 to hit the Dark Raiders, but on their random movement it goes horribly wrong, even with a reroll, and they end up totally exposed on a hill for all to see. In the magic phase, my opponent dispels all my spells. In the shooting phase, my skewer targets the Dread Knights but misses. The Madgets hidden in the Pointygits get released, and I manage to get both Madgets through. 2d6 strain 5 armor piercing 1 hits. Hooray! Double 1s, 2 Dead Elves. It is time for a full 51 shot volley fire from my Cave Gobbo horde. I target the Legionnaires with maximum firepower, killing one elf. My Gid launcher aims at the Dread Knights, drifts off, but manages to hit the Legionnaires, killing one elf. Okay, 2 Mad Gids, 51 short bow shots, and 1 hit with the Gid launcher, 4 dead elves in total. I'm quite impressed by the inefficiency of my Gobbo so far. My Splatterer hits the left hunting chariot and gets lucky, dealing 4 wounds, killing it. The Hydra gets terrified and storms away, ending up 2 inches from the board edge. My Scrap Wagon gets lucky with throwing weapons and actually kills 2 Dark Raiders, forcing a leadership test, which they fail, and they storm off 2 inches from the table edge. There was no close combat. And will my opponent steamroll my whole army after some glaring mistakes from my part? Find out in the Dread Elves turn 2. In the movement phase, as I'm still searching for my Rape Whistle, he charges my Pipsqueaks with the Legionnaires. My Nasher Herd is charged by the Raptor Chariot and Dread Knights. My Nasher Dashers get charged by the Ravencloaks, Hunting Chariot and Dark Raiders. All charging units make it into battle, but as he wheels to maximize contact with his Legionnaires, he steps on a Mad Gid, losing 5 Legionnaires, better than my whole last shooting phase. His cowardly Dark Raiders and my left flank rally. Hail Hydra! The monster remembers that it is supposed to be scary to others, not scared by others, and rallies. He moves the rest of his army forwards. In the magic phase, he gives my Skewer d6 strength 4 hits, causing a wound. In the shooting phase, his left auxiliary unit puts 1 wound on my Scrap Wagon. I forgot that I bought the blurry and hard target upgrade. Whoops. Close combat phase. Of course, my Nasher Dashers are slain by impact hits alone, and he gets a nice overrun with the Chariot and Raiders. The Ravencloaks decide to pivot instead. In the other combat, all but 2 Nashers are slain by 6 impact hits, and who knows how many strength 6 attacks from his General and Dread Knights. My last 2 Nashers get lucky, killing 1 Dread Knight before being eaten by the Raptors. He decides to overrun with his Chariot and pivots his Dread Knights. In the combat against the Pipsqueak Grotlings, I realized just how potent the Ponzi Elves are. They hit with all of their attacks and wound with all of their attacks except 1, dealing 20 wounds. My Grotlings hit back, killing 1 elf, and then disappear under the shoes of the elves due to their unstable nature. Because of his Beastmaster BSB Swift Stride thing, he then makes a long overrun, hitting the flank of my Spear Gobbos. Great! If he breaks my General's unit now, it is basically game over. It's still not over yet though. It's time for the Orcs Goblins turn 2. In the movement phase, out of pure desperation, I try to hit the flank of the Legionnaires with my Scrap Wagon, missing by 1 inch. My Nasher Dashers go for the recently rallied Dark Raiders and manage to hit them. My Cave Trolls and Giant try to move around the ruin. Poor deployment, poor deployment. I still facepalm myself when I think back on that deployment. In the magic phase, I tried to reduce the initiative of his Dread Knights, so I could blast them with the Devouring Darkness spell. However, I only roll a 1 for the reduction, so not quite enough. I try to hex his Legionnaires with Fix It Up, but my opponent dispels it. In the shooting phase, my Shortbow Gobbo Horde releases 2 Mad Gits, one hitting the Dread Knights, the other one not quite making it. I managed to kill 1 Dread Knight. My Skewer tries to target the Dread Knights at point blank range, but misses. I then get lucky with my Gid launcher, killing his remaining 5 rank and file models in the Dread Knight unit. Hurrah! My Splatterer then gets a direct hit on his General, but he saves it with his 4 abort save. In the close combat phase, my Nasher Dashers kill all 3 Dark Raiders, and I only lose 2 in the process. I then restrain and reform, facing the Hydra instead of the table edge. My Cave Gobbo unit manages to pass its Leadership 3 roll, because of the unruly cold-blooded 3d6 leadership tests for Hordes. I also manage to pass my Reform test, and I go bunker style, trying to grind him down in the coming turns. Well, that could have been worse. It's the Dread Elves turn 3. At the beginning of the movement phase, the Dread Prince charges out of his combined unit and engages the Skewer. The rest of his units move closer, ready to encircle me in a cloud of impact hits and crossbow bolts. In the magic phase, he blasts some sort of spell on my Cave Gobbo Shortbow Horde and kills 4 Gobbos. In the shooting phase, his Ravencloak shoots and kills the closest Mad Git. His Raptor Chariot shoots and kills 1 Cave Gobbo from the Horde. The the right auxiliary unit kills another Madgit, and the left flank auxiliary unit puts 2 wounds on Dumdi the Giant. I say Giant because he's Swedish, obviously. In the close combat phase, my skewer naturally dies to a powerful Dread Prince, who makes a nice long overrun. In the Cave Gobbo combat, he wins, but I'm steadfast, and I pass my rerollable Leadership 9 test. And now it's time for the Orcs and Goblins turn 3. My situation is still precarious, as you can see. In the movement phase, Dumdi and the trolls charge the auxiliaries on the left flank, and the trolls hit the big monster as well. My giant takes 2 wounds from the stand and shoot reaction. My Nasher Dashers try to move closer to the battle, but only get a 5 on their rerollable 3d6 random movement. Big surprise! My Scrap Wagon moves into the flank of the Elves. My Cave Gobbo Shortbow Horde performs a swift reform and turns to face the oncoming tide of chariots and other fast movers. I'm getting really tired of balancing my horde on that stupid rock. I moved my Big Shaman to the right of the unit, but for obvious reasons I couldn't actually place his model there. He will suddenly appear on the right side though. Note that this is a huge mistake since I exposed my left flank to the Kraken. I keep forgetting that the rocks on the hill are not impassable / dangerous terrain like I used to play in the 8th edition of Warhammer Fantasy Battles. In the magic phase, I cast the Shadow Miasma on his big Kraken, reducing its stats by 3. I get an Irresistible, then lose a wizard level on my level 3, thus he's no longer a master wizard, and he only gets +1 to his dispel and casting attempts. I also lose the Mystifying Miasma spell permanently and any remaining power dice. Sad days. In the shooting phase, my Git Launcher gets lucky again and hits the Dread Prince, dealing 6 hits, inflicting 5 wounds. He saves 4 of them with his 4-up ward save though. But now I know he bleeds. My Splatter then gets lucky with a direct hit on him. However, he again saves on his ward save. Is it really a 4-up ward save and not a 2-up? My Cave Gobbo shoot their 19 shots on the Oracle, wounding with 3, but she saves 2 of them. So close! In the close combat phase, my Scrap Wagon rolls a double 1 for impact hits, killing 2. Where have I seen that before? My Gobbos and characters overperform though, and kill 4. Thus I end up narrowly winning combat. But my opponent sticks. I really thought I had a good chance of breaking him. Well, no. The auxiliaries fail their fear test and have weapon skill 1. My giant flops a little bit, only causing 1 wound with his swing with club ability. He rolled a double 1 for amount of attacks, and hit with 1 of them and wounded with 1 of them. Though, the Hydra kills 2 cave trolls with its combined attacks and breath weapon, but the trolls destroy the remaining 9 elves in the unit, thus I win combat, and the Hydra breaks and runs 12 inches. I try to restrain my trolls, since that leadership bubble is getting further and further away, but I fail and my trolls are in on a narrow second with 11 inches. So close! And now let's get to the Dread Elves turn 4. This was a particularly funny moment. During the movement phase, my opponent starts moving this unit about. I ask him what he's doing. Moving my other auxiliaries? He answers. You only had 2 of those units, right? Yeah. What about those who were just killed by the trolls then? That was funny. He didn't quite manage to take them all the way off the table. But, well, here they come. Lots and lots of fast-moving legs approach my Gobbo Horde. 2 chariots, and the Oracle declares a charge. Oh, and the big Alpha Kraken in my left flank too. My Cave Gobbos pass their terror test and try to stand and shoot on the Raptor Chariot, but to no avail. The Hunting Chariot doesn't make it though, but the rest of the chargers do. Hail Hydra! The Alpha Hydra rallies again. His remaining raiders move around the hill, maybe trying to hunt down my Scrap Wagon. In the magic phase, my opponent doesn't have a particularly successful magic phase, as I close him down, use my scroll and dispel everything. But in the shooting phase, the Ravencloaks kill the last Madgit. His remaining unit of auxiliaries put a wound on my giant. 1 wound left. This is getting critical. In the close combat phase, I take a lot of casualties, but I manage to kill his Oracle. No more magic for her. My Gobbos pass their leadership test and stick. Because I'm charged in the flank, I am unable to go into bus formation. This one is going to be rough. The Spear Gobbos do well. It really helps having netters, as my opponent flops. This time, there's no escape. His general is too far away to help them now, and the elves auto-break. My scrap wagon pursues, and my gobbos pivot instead. The elves are caught by the scrap wagon, and it is perfectly positioned for my next turn. Now, this is what the battlefield looks like. Note how my opponent forgot to move his general in the movement phase. This will of course be rectified. My opponent makes a very delayed move, trying to hide his general behind the line of sight of my war machines, but doesn't quite make it. However, he's ready to help the remaining units in close combat the next Dread Elf movement phase. I'm such a nice guy. It's time for the Orcs and Goblins turn 4. In the movement phase, a miracle occurs. My cave trolls are clever enough to charge the Hydra, passing their stupidity test on Leadership 4. My spear gobbos charge into the flank of the Alpha Kraken, needing only 4 inches. They manage to get there. The Dark Raiders are unsurprisingly hit by the scrap wagon, and I hope to turn them into just that, scrap. My Nasher Dashers nudge another 4 inches forwards with their 3d6 random movement. They have now used 2 turns to cover the impressive distance of 9 inches. The giant tries to pass his Leadership 10 March test, but fails, so he's unable to position himself behind the Hydra and gain some cover from the auxiliaries. In the magic phase, I try to reduce the toughness of the Kraken by d3. I get an irresistible, and I reduce the Kraken's toughness by 1, down to a total of 4. My big shaman takes a wound, but luckily my other level 2 shaman doesn't take a wound. My war machines must be imbued with a rune of accuracy or something, because in the shooting phase I hit his general again with my Gid launcher. I get 3 hits, but I don't wound. My splatterer gives him a 3rd direct hit, but again his 4 ward save saves him. The Dread Prince is unkillable. He has now absorbed 3 hits from a Gid launcher and 3 direct hits from a splatterer, with only his 4 ward save to help him. Impressive! In the close combat phase, my trolls take a wound, but I also give him 1 wound, so I win combat by 1. The Hydra sticks. I deal 4 impact hits with my scrap wagon and end up killing 2, and my remaining 5 attacks kill 1 more. I forget about the blurry rule, and he deals a wound to me. I win combat, and he narrowly escapes with a 12-inch run. I pursue 11 inches. In the large combat, I totally flop my attacks with my characters and other spear gobbos. I deal 2 wounds to the big toughness 4 monster. Ultra fail. I managed to pass my leadership test though. Get ready for the Dread Elves turn 5. In the movement phase, my opponent charges the shortbow horde with his general, the remaining chariot, and his Ravencloaks, trying to get away from the scrap wagon. His auxiliaries charge the flank of my spear gobbos. Only the general and chariot make it. The Dark Riders rally. Well, no oracle, no magic. Let's go to the shooting phase. No shooting, since his remaining shooters made some failed charge moves. In the close combat phase, I end up killing his monster, but he also kills quite a few of my gobbos. I get really lucky and pass my minimal leadership test with the no longer horde. Against the trolls, he hits with 7 attacks, wounds with 6. I save 1 wound with my 6-up armor save and 4-up regen. I lose combat by a lot. My trolls break, flee 3 inches, and are overrun. This causes Dumpty the Giant to fail his leadership 10 test, run directly away from the destroyed units. The stupid git reaches the forest, trips over a tree stump, hits his forehead on a rock, and dies. Monsters have to roll 46 for dangerous terrain tests. This also happens every time a giant tries to jump in combat. Is it really supposed to be that risky? Wow, that Alpha Hydra just killed 440 points. This will be avenged. Get ready for the Orcs and Goblins turn 5. Only random movement this turn. Squeaky wheels gets the kick. The scrap wagon hits the flank of the Ravencloaks. I really hope to cripple them with impact hits now. Yes! My Nasher Dashers managed to roll a 6 with their 3d6 random movement after re-rolling the result hitting the Hydra. Hooray! In the magic phase, I managed to hex the Dread Prince, so he has to re-roll 6s to hit, to wound, and armor save rolls of 6. In the shooting phase, my super accurate splatterer hits the auxiliaries, killing 4. This is nice because it removes the second rank from that unit, making it less of a threat in my flank. In the close combat phase, my Nasher Dashers kill the Hydra, but it also manages to kill my Cave Gobbo Chief and Cave Squig, Dang Dong, and Bitey. In the central combat, all but one shortbow goblin are killed, including my Path of Shadows big shaman. I forgot about the Pan of Protection Pinchin, so he should have had a save. I miraculously managed to pass the leadership tests with my lone Gobbo from the shortbow unit. We then tried to nudge the units so they still remained in base contact while maximizing their frontage. My scrap wagon rolls a double 1 for impact hits, but kills 2, taking a wound in return. I keep forgetting about the blurry rule. This was enough to win combat, and luckily my opponent rolls 10 or 11 for his leadership test. I managed to run him over, destroying the unit. So unlucky, and yet so lucky in the same combat. It is now time for the Dread Elves turn 6. In the movement phase, my opponent tries to break my spirit, charging in with the Dark Raiders. They couldn't see my scrap wagon, and with the auxiliaries. They both make it into combat. No magic, no shooting. In the close combat phase, Mr.Gobbo challenges the Dread Prince, and they just hold a staring contest. My opponent removes another 6 of my Spear Gobbos. I tried to use the spear killing blow from the 3 Gobbos who were able to strike at the Dark Raiders, and I managed to get 1 killing blow! Unlimited power! Well, yeah, that was the only wound I caused that round. My lone short bow standard bearer breaks from combat and loses the standard trying to save his own skin. Mr. Gobbo and his pointy gits stick though. It is important to note that I forgot to read the rules for spears. I had heard that they now had armor piercing 1, and that was nice. I then thought that they had killing blow against cavalry only if they were charged by that troop type, of course only in the front. But in reality, I now had killing blow against both his chariots, his general, and the Dark Rider. Next time, I'll read all the rules when I try something new. This would definitely have been in my favour. It is time for the Orcs and Goblins turn 6. The final round of the game. In the movement phase, I recall rolling a double 1 for my lone Gobbo, rallying him. That was pretty nice, I guess. My Nasher Dashers try to make the 15-inch move into the rear of the auxiliaries, but end up moving 3 inches instead, touching the field. I get lucky and I don't fail a single dangerous terrain test. The Scrap Wagon, not satisfied by being the MVP, wants even more glory and hits the rear end of the 2 chariots. This could be decisive. In the magic phase, I hex the enemy general again with the reroll 6 spell. Go big or go home! I try out the vortex. I don't know if this is actually allowed, but I couldn't find anything preventing me from casting a vortex out of or into combat. It doesn't matter in the end. I got it off, but I didn't cause a single wound with armor piercing 6. All 4 units touched got -1 weapon skill, but they still hit me on a 2-up. It only made a difference on the Raptor Chariot, because then I would hit it on a 4-up instead of a 5-up. It was about 3 o'clock in the night / morning at that moment, so we forgot about the Raptor Wagon's -1 weapon skill in the close combat phase anyway. There was no shooting, so let's go to the close combat phase. In this decisive phase of the game, a true final, my Scrap Wagon finally made 7 impact hits, the average on 2 dice, and caused enough wounds to remove the hunting chariot. In the challenge, Mr. Gobbo took 1 wound, but I still killed the last Dark Raider with my Gobbos, and won combat by quite a bit. My opponent got really unlucky and rolled 10s on all 3 leadership tests, and so I decided to pursue his general with both my units, and let the chariots and auxiliaries flee. My opponent got even more unlucky with his general, rolling only 5 with his swift stride. Mr. Gobbo and his unit rolled 7, so they finally killed the otherwise unkillable, at least by shooting, Dread Prince. Hurrah! A victory by around 1300 points to Mr. Gobbo and his tricksy gits. We have seen another battle plan executed to perfection. Okay, time for post-game evaluation, and now I have to be honest. Well, I won through sheer luck. I had no real battle plan, and I was still thinking about my battle plan against Stunties for a couple of turns into the game. I was reacting more than acting, but I really need to read the rules more carefully. I promise myself I won't make the same amount of mistakes in my next game. This was my opponent's first 9th Age game, and I think he generally liked it. Now, it's your turn to correct all of our mistakes so we can learn and grow as players. Fire away! And if not, I'll see you in my next battle report. I will probably play another battle next week. I should go. Mr. Gobbo out.